Well, as you know, last May we got a new pope, and you may be wondering as catechumenate ministers, what does the new pope have to say about our ministry?
Hi, my name is Diana McAlintal.
And I'm Nick Wagner.
And just 2 days after Pope Leo's election, he came out with an address to his cardinals, to the College of Cardinals.
Yeah, and in that address, it hasn't gotten a lot of publicity, and I'm kind of surprised because in that address, he laid out kind of a blueprint for what he expects his papacy to be about and what his vision of the church going forward is. And everything he had to say in that address, especially those priorities that he laid out, kind of directly impact our ministry as catechumenate ministers.
Mm-hmm. And in that address, he was very clear that we are continuing with the Second Vatican Council's vision of a renewed church, a church that is participatory, that is missionary, that involves the participation of all the baptized. And that's exactly where the catechumenate comes into play, because that's exactly what we do. We are drawing people closer to Christ so that all the baptized can participate in the mission of Christ.
And that emphasis on continuing the mission of the Second Vatican Council, he's making that emphasis particularly through the lens of Pope Francis's document, Joy of the Gospel. And if you remember, Joy of the Gospel came out relatively early in Pope Francis's papacy, and it was kind of his blueprint for the vision of the church. So Pope Leo is essentially saying, I intend to continue the work of my predecessor in implementing the values, the goals of the Second Vatican Council. And in his address to the cardinals, he focused on 6 priorities that he drew directly from Joy of the Gospel.
And he was very good because he gave us the exact place in Pope Francis's document where he's building upon these priorities.
So we're going to focus on, I picked a favorite one, Diana picked a favorite one. There are 6 of them. But if you want to see all 6 of them, I wrote a blog post about this, and we'll put a link to that in the comments section. You can go there to find the other 6. But I'm going to focus on the first one that he identified, which is to do the first and most essential task of the church, which is to proclaim Jesus Christ. So as I said, all of these fundamental principles come from Joy of the Gospel. That principle to proclaim Christ was a key theme not only in Joy of the Gospel but throughout Pope Francis's papacy. So that first priority is not a surprise to any of us, because as Diana said, that is our job as catechumenate ministers. We were doing this priority before it became sort of famous as a priority.
Yes, we were evangelizing before it became cool to evangelize in the Catholic Church, right?
So what did Pope Francis say about Joy of the Gospel? He said, about proclaiming Christ. He said there is a fundamental core message that we have to get across. And that message is that Jesus Christ loves you. He gave his life to save you, and he's standing at your side every day to enlighten and guide you and free you. And there are so many people in the world who basically don't understand that message. They're living in darkness. They're living in some kind of bondage. They're living in some kind of, they're caught up in either a disease or an addiction or some mental state that prevents them from living their full human capacity, their full human self.
Mm-hmm. And as catechumenate ministers, sometimes we get caught up with more of the technical things of the initiation process, the practical things of schedules and all of that, and we sometimes forget that essential thing that we are meant to hand on, the essential person that we are called to introduce to these seekers, and that is always Christ. Christ is not an ideology or an idea or a theory or a dogma. Christ is a relationship.
Now, Pope Leo, he had a job before he became Pope, obviously, and his most recent job before he became Pope, the job he had when the conclave started, was he was the head of the Vatican office that was responsible for recommending new bishops to the Pope. So his office, his dicastery, would go and scour the world for the best possible candidates to be elevated to bishop next time an opening happened in your region or that country, and they would compile a list. So Pope Francis would have a ready list to choose from when it was time to appoint someone. So when he was in that role, he said this: we're often preoccupied with teaching doctrine, the way of living our faith, but we risk forgetting our first task is to teach what it means to know Jesus Christ and to bear witness to our closeness to the Lord. That's just what Diana said. This is all about relationship. Our first task is to announce that relationship, our closeness to the Lord. And so Pope Leo went on to say, this comes first, to communicate the beauty of the faith, the beauty and joy of knowing Jesus. It means that we ourselves are living it. So we have to, so if you imagine the world is filled with people kind of living in darkness, and we go out there living the light, and people see that and they get attracted to the light that comes from us, the light of Christ that shines from us. So he says they have to see us living it and sharing this experience. So we have to physically kind of go out. All the people inside our church walls already know that experience. So we have to go outside the walls of the church and share that light with those who haven't experienced it yet.
Yeah, and so it's sharing that light, but the way we share it needs to be joyful. So if Pope Leo is building upon Pope Francis's joy of the gospel, the first word there is joy. And I remember Pope Francis saying, we can't look like, our faces cannot look like we are sourpusses. He used that phrase, that word, in an official church document. And I can imagine Pope Leo saying something similar, that if we are to proclaim Christ, our proclamation needs to be the joy, the beauty of our faith. And I know sometimes we get into the rules and regulations of our faith, the things you cannot do, the things that, the do's and don'ts of being a Catholic, being a Christian. And we have to start with what does following Jesus give us the freedom to do? What is the joy that is right there ready for us, waiting for us when we follow Jesus? What is the wonder and the awe and the beauty of life all around us in our human capacity when we follow Jesus? It's not about fear. It's not about intimidation. It's not about being afraid that you're going to mess up. This is about opening the doors wide to bring in those who are seeking joy, seeking something more in their life.
So if we want to align ourselves and our ministries with Pope Leo's vision of the church going forward, then we might want to ask ourselves, are we doing that? Are we helping seekers to fall in love with Jesus? Are we emphasizing our relationship and sharing our relationship and the beauty of that relationship with the seekers? Or are we simply teaching facts about Jesus and helping people learn his biography and the details of his ministry, but not really, leading them to that deep, intimate relationship?
All right, so that was Nick's favorite of Pope Leo's 6 priorities for the vision of the church during his pontificate. Now I want to focus on my favorite, which was the second priority that Pope Leo addressed. And this is the missionary conversion of the entire church. And he's building on Pope Francis's emphasis on how conversion begins with us. If we are to proclaim Christ, we have to look at ourselves first and see how are we being missionaries of Christ? How are we embodying that joy of Christ? How are we, the faithful, living out an authentic way of life that is an image of who Christ is a true image. Now, we have to be very careful because sometimes our image of what Christ calls us to be, how Christ calls us to live, is not quite authentic, is not quite aligned with the gospel itself. Or we pick and choose the things that reveal a true Christian spirit. So we have to look at the entirety of Christ's mission and look at our own selves, both as individuals and as a community, to see, are we truly proclaiming what Christ is calling all of us to do? So here, Pope Leo is saying that we need to be close to those who are suffering, close to those who are in need of hearing the message of Christ. And we begin really with those who are around us. For catechumenate ministers and for those of us who are leaders in the church, we can start simply by looking around at our Sunday assembly and making sure that we are looking for those who are newcomers, those who are visitors, those who are sitting by themselves, those who look like they are in need of a friend. There is the epidemic of loneliness in our world today that so many are facing, and the message of Christ is a cure for that loneliness, but only if we go and talk to those who are in need of that cure. So let's start with the low-hanging fruit of our assemblies, Sunday after Sunday, whenever we see someone in need. And that's a good way for all catechumenate ministers to make sure that we are being examples of constant, ongoing evangelization.
So when we hear that word conversion, this priority, that the missionary conversion of the entire church, I tend to think, first of all, of the seekers coming to us and they say, I want to get baptized, or I want to get married in the church, or they come and ask for something. And I think to myself, well, they need to get converted. They need to have a deeper relationship with Jesus, and I need to help draw them into that. And that part is true. But in this particular priority, Pope Leo, who again is echoing Pope Francis, is saying, as Diana said, we have to first of all look at the conversion of ourselves. And so then I hear that, and then I think, well, that means that I need to pay attention at Mass more often, or I need to be nicer to my neighbor, or I need to not fight with Diana so much, or I need to, I need to be more holy in a sense. And that is also true. But again, not the point of this particular priority. This priority is becoming a conversion to a missionary disciple. And that means being converted to looking outside ourselves, looking outside our church walls, looking outside at the world, and going out and saying, who it's related to the first priority. Who needs to know this message? So it's not just, in a sense, realizing that other people need to know this message, but actually getting up and going out. That Pope Francis said over and over, go forth. So this conversion is to, in a sense, from a sedentary lifestyle to an active lifestyle, where we're actually moving into the world with that true missionary spirit. And so if I always try to couple the word conversion with the word mission, then I'm getting closer to what this priority is about. And that's not natural for me. I didn't grow up thinking that way. And so I have to sort of tell myself, whenever I hear or think or read the word conversion, I need to put the word mission or missionary right next to it. So I understand what this priority, what this fundamental call is asking me to do as a baptized Christian.
Mm-hmm. And this missionary sense of conversion is not just Pope Francis or Pope Leo. It's in the document of the Order of Christian Initiation of Adults. It is what the entire process is all about, conversion to Christ. But if you look at paragraph 4 in the ritual text, it talks about how the entire community of the faithful renews their own conversion for the sake of the seeker, because that is what we are training seekers to do, not just to draw closer to Christ for their own sake, but to draw closer to Christ so that they might also go out to be missionaries of that mercy of Christ, that hope that they have encountered in Christ. Now, this sense of conversion also challenges us as we become more and more like Christ as missionaries out in the world, because Christ, I would guess, was also converted himself. I know that might sound a little strange, but it's not a one-way street, this encounter with Christ. Christ is also drawing himself closer and closer and closer to the other, and seeing the Father in the other, and that love for the Father in the other, no matter what, is how we all become drawn into the heart of Jesus, the heart of the Father. And that will require us to look at our own biases, our own hardness, our own, we've always done it this way, or we've never done it that way kind of paradigms when it comes to our own thoughts about other people, our own structures that we build in our catechumenate ministries. So one example is for, I know I've done this and I've tried hard not to replicate it, but to say, oh, you know, we meet on Wednesday at 7:30. If you can't come to our gathering at Wednesday, 7:30 each week, then maybe you need to find a different parish that has a meeting time that you can attend. And I remember coming up with schedules with the parishes around my parish to coordinate meeting time so that other people can go. And that's kind of crazy as I think about it now, because Christ is not simply at Wednesday 7:30. Christ is whenever 2 or 3 gather in Christ's name. And so we have to rethink our own perspectives and wonder and convert ourselves closer and closer to how Christ would have encountered this person. How do we see Christ in the other, even when they challenge us, whether in our paradigms about how the world works or in our structures that we have built around our parishes?
And that call to become missionary disciples, to call to conversion, to go out and proclaim the message, isn't just found in Pope Leo's statements or Pope Francis's documents or in the order of Christian initiation. It is found, first of all, in the gospel, right? So that at the end of Matthew's gospel, Jesus says to the disciples, go and make more, go and make disciples. And then, then we turn to Acts. In the second chapter of Acts, we see exactly how they were doing that. And it's all those things that they did in Acts, and the ways that they practiced sort of radical hospitality and openness to the other, and reaching out to those who are most in need and sharing their resources with those who needed them, and so on. All those things that are, it's like a catalog, it's like a blueprint of how to be a missionary disciple in the book of Acts. And I love the way Pope Francis sort of summarized that. He said, we are all shepherds, and since we are shepherds, we have to smell like the sheep. Yeah. And to smell like the sheep means you got to be out there in among the sheep. You can't smell like the sheep by being in the shepherd office, and overlooking the kind of the field out there. You have to go out into the sheepfold, and I don't know about if you've ever encountered real sheep, but if you get anywhere close to them, you're going to wind up smelling like sheep, So Pope Francis must have encountered that somewhere in his life that he used that image. But basically that's what Jesus is telling the disciples to do, is to go out and be shepherds and wind up smelling like the sheep.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to get dirty. Don't be afraid to hang out with those who others might say, oh, you shouldn't be hanging out with them, because isn't that exactly what Jesus did, right? And that's one reason that he was crucified, because he hung out with people who thought shouldn't be worthy of attention, of love, of forgiveness. And so let's continue to do these 2 priorities there are 4 priorities more that Pope Leo has outlined for the church, for his vision of how we are to continue the mission of Christ. So make sure you take a look at the blog post that we'll link down in the comments here that outline Pope Leo's 6 priorities, 6 points for his vision of the church.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for all the work you do, and we just are honored to be sharing this ministry with you. And God bless you as you go forth and try to implement this vision.